Thanks very much, Las Cian Corda. Yeah, I think a number of these amendments from 2 to 15, 17 and 18, they go to whether you're going to have a broad or a narrow approach to the registration and regulation of lobbyists. And I think at the moment, unfortunately, the government's approach is quite a narrow view of who can be lobbied and also who can do the lobbying. And I think it won't capture in any way that the real types of lobbying that go on, the myriad of different tactics, the myriad of different types of lobbying that take place. Lobbying is central to how our capitalist democracy works. It's how the rich and the powerful communicate their interests primarily to the established political parties and get their interests eventually transferred into legislation or whatever that they want. It's a huge business. Billions and billions of euros across Europe spent on lobbying. One instance alone at an EU level, where I was an MEP at the time, about the question of traffic light labelling of food, whereby you'd have a simple green, orange or red explaining the fat content, the salt content, etc., and making it simple for consumers. And the food industry across Europe, including from Ireland, spent €1 billion on lobbying to stop that going through the European Parliament. 30,000 people employed at least on this at the Brussels level in terms of lobbying on various interest behalves. And those who know how lobbying actually happens know that, yes, some lobbying happens by lobbying companies acting on behalf of industries or individuals and arranging meetings with people saying we want to make representations on behalf of this company or this industry or that industry, and sitting forward and having a simple meeting that is very clearly about lobbying. And those kind of organisations would presumably be captured by the narrow definition put forward by the government, and they should be captured, and there should be a register of those lobbying interests and that lobbying that takes place. But lobbying is a much, much broader thing than that. It's informal contact. It's a revolving door. It's a small political caste in this country. It's a small big business elite in this country. And it's the relationships that exist between all of those people is how much effective lobbying actually takes place, is those informal contacts that take place. And the danger in terms of what's proposed is that it won't capture that. And in particular, I would echo the point of Deputy MacDonald about AstroTurf campaigning in relation to Amendment 18. And this isn't just an American phenomenon. Again, my experience at a European level is that AstroTurf campaigning, false grassroots campaigns driven by big business interests and involving, in some cases, duped volunteers are a tactic that are used at a European level, whereby you set up a false campaign, you have your interests covered with a veil of public interest, and you mobilise people on that basis. Those people wouldn't be captured by this, whereas that is lobbying. It's a form of lobbying that takes place. That any loophole that exists will be exploited by big business and other interests to try and have their interests reflected in the corridors of power. And so for that reason I would oppose Amendment 18, and I would support Deputy MacDonald's Amendment 17. Just briefly in terms of Amendments 2 to 15, I think it's obvious that the amendment should be supported, and that all these various semi-state bodies that operate with taxpayers' money should be brought within the remit of this, and that lobbying representations to those organisations should be covered. I mean, just to take the most current example, Irish Water. I mean, it's obvious there's huge money potentially to be made by various contractors who have an eye later down the road on full privatisation, but for now want to get contracts for design, build and operate of various aspects, which they already have, various aspects of our water infrastructure. Huge money to be made from those contracts, very, very valuable. Similarly, in terms of the outsourcing that goes on through the HSE and the various other bodies mentioned there, there's a lot of money to be made, a lot of representations to be made, and that they should be covered by this legislation.